The good old days in Canada? Yeah, no. That's a myth. A marketing slogan. A historical fairy tale people tell themselves to avoid confronting reality. That story didn't come from nowhere. It was built. After Confederation, leaders knew Canada's international image mattered. So they created a national identity based on politeness, order, peacekeeping, and moral superiority, all while covering up the parts that didn't match the brand. Residential schools? Not part of the story. The Indian Act? Not mentioned. Forced relocations, land theft, segregation, starvation policies, sterilization programs, internment camps? All quietly erased or downplayed. Then the textbooks took over the job. Generations grew up with a version of Canada so sanitized, it might as well have been a Disney movie. And when people grow up with a fairy tale, they panic when you tell them the real story. That's why people cling to nostalgia. Not because the good old days were good. Well, except maybe for them. No, they cling to it because the truth threatens the identity they were raised with. And I already know what the comment section will look like under this video. It'll be a few people saying things like, no, we just want to go back to when people had more respect. Or when people actually adopted Canadian culture. When we could say Merry Christmas without getting canceled. But here's the thing. None of those excuses hold up under the slightest bit of pressure. More respect usually means when people respected the hierarchy I benefited from. When people adopted Canadian culture usually means when everyone acted white, Christian, and English speaking. And Merry Christmas has never been illegal. It's just no longer the only holiday that matters. These comments always show up because people feel something they can't name. Or won't name. Not in polite company anyway. And instead of saying the quiet part out loud, they reach for cultural buzzwords that keep them from having to examine where that feeling comes from. Because here's the uncomfortable layer under all of it. For a long time in Canada, white Canadians could say and do whatever they wanted to without repercussion. And that wasn't an accident. That was policy. The systems built in the 1800s and 1900s, schools, churches, governments, courts, police forces, were designed by people who believed deeply in white superiority. That isn't a conspiracy. It's in their letters, their speeches, their laws, their newspapers. They built a country where whiteness was the norm, the default, the expectation. And anyone else? Expected to assimilate, stay quiet, or disappear. So when someone today says they miss the good old days, they might not consciously mean, I miss when white people had unchecked power. But that is the world those days were built on. So you do the math. Though you don't have to be a card-carrying racist to inherit the comfort those systems created either. That's how systemic racism works. People benefit from it without ever seeing it. A lot of people say, we're too sensitive now. But that's not what's actually happening. What's happening is that the truth, the real truth, finally has a spotlight. Residential schools are being talked about openly. The Indian Act is no longer invisible. People know what happened to Indigenous children whose graves were never marked. Immigrant communities are no longer expected to disappear into some sanitized idea of Canadian culture. When you grow up inside a myth, truth feels like an attack. And accountability looks like oversensitivity. And that's the part almost no one wants to sit with. Nostalgia isn't about the past. It's about protecting the version of ourselves that the past made us feel like. It's about the comfort of a world where the hierarchy was clear and they were at the top of it. Which brings us back to the heart of this. A country strong enough to tell the truth about itself is stronger than a country hiding behind stories. So if the good old days require entire chapters of history to be erased, if they require people to ignore racism, assimilation, land theft, and generational trauma, if they only feel good when certain voices were silent, then those days weren't good. They were just unquestioned. And unquestioned stories are the easiest ones to believe, but the most dangerous ones to keep. And if the good old days you cling to so desperately require systems to continue that benefit only the white folks but oppress everyone else, they weren't that good. Seriously, time to move forward. We are, maybe just without you. Peace out, and if you're not already following me, you should. It's going to be a ride.